Okay, so I just finished reading Other Minds by Peter Godfrey Smith. I started reading this back in November, and I just kind of picked it up, and it was really interesting every time I read it. I really liked it, but I just kind of, I don't know, I was reading other things, I think, and I wasn't quite invested. And then I went on my trip earlier this year, and anyway, so I just finished it. Like, I picked it up, and then for the last week or so, I've just been reading only this instead of kind of alternating between. I've been kind of cycling through a few books, but I just committed to reading this one. I just really wanted to, finish it. And I'm so happy I did because it is so good. I gave it, I think, 4 out of 5 stars. I don't really know. I don't really know if that matters, but basically all that means is that I thought it was really good. Basically it's called Other Minds, the Octopus, and the Evolution of Intelligent Life. So essentially this guy is a professor of philosophy. So he's not actually a biologist, but he knows a lot about the history and philosophy of science. So he's got a PhD, he's a professor, and so he's very intelligent. He's done his own research and then also done research from what other people have found. So he's really well informed and well educated on the subject, and basically he just kind of I can't exactly remember how it starts because it was a while ago, but basically it kind of starts off by talking about the beginning of life as we currently theorize. So basically life starts off in the ocean from single-celled organisms evolving and developing communication and reactions with outside influences, and then how that changes to being internalized, and that actually allows for multicellular organisms to evolve. And then from there, everything builds up and organisms become more and more complex, and then life in the ocean explodes and then eventually finds its way on land. So that's the theory as of right now that is most widely accepted, and so that's what he's going off of. And so essentially what he is talking about is that intelligent life evolved more than once. So it evolved in vertebrates and then also in invertebrates. So mammalian and bird intelligence is separate from cephalopod intelligence. So if you guys don't know, if you're not in science or anything, cephalopods are actually in the mollusk family. So mollusks are like snails and oysters and that kind of thing, and they're also squids and octopods and cuttlefish and stuff. So fun fact if you didn't know that, they're all mollusks. But then there's a subclass, and or a class, I don't exactly remember the genus, species kind of order of it, but mollusks, and then more specific is cephalopods. So basically he's talking about that and how the octopus, and he kind of also branches off into cuttlefish and not really squids, but basically the octopus and its intelligence is the closest thing that we're ever going to get to meeting intelligent aliens, because they completely evolved separately from us, and their intelligence completely evolved separately from us. So vertebrate intelligence and brains kind of evolved from having a spinal cord and having bones and a centralized nervous system, whereas the octopus's neurons are more evenly spread throughout their body. So it's just kind of talking about the differences in that way, and it's crazy interesting to me because I love biology. But yeah, so, and then it kind of gets more philosophical in the part that I read more recently, and basically he goes into talking about internal dialogue and how important that is and how unimportant it is also. And he compares the octopus to baboons, I think. Yeah, I don't know why I said I think. I know. He compared cuttlefish and baboons, and cuttlefish, basically the giant cuttlefish are about 3 feet big, so they're not giant, but whatever, so they're big-ish. And basically he talks about how they have these chromatophores, which are cells underneath a thin layer of their skin, and that allows them to change color, and for camouflage, and also for displays for mating, and when they're you know, trying to avoid predation. And so he's talking about how they're so loud and expressive, but do they really know it all the time? And how complicated their output of information is, but when they see it, or the information that they take in, it's not as complex. So communication is a lot simpler, even though their output is really, really complicated. Whereas with baboons, they only have like 3 or 4 calls, but the way that they internalize them and what's the word? Process them is a lot more complex, and they can form very, very complicated and complex social structures, rather where cephalopods are generally a little bit more solitary, and they don't have the same social, I keep saying I'm sorry, they don't have the same social organization, but they have a different kind of intelligence. So I'm not still 100% like an expert on it, or anything like that by any means, but it just was really thought-provoking, and I don't know, I just have a lot of thoughts on it. It's kind of specific thoughts about certain passages. I didn't underline a lot, but I underlined a few things that I guess I could touch on. I should have made notes, but I just don't really have time. I have to go to night school soon. But I just wanted to kind of talk about it while it's still fresh, because I was just about to pick up another book, but I thought I should do this first. Oh yeah, this part was kind of interesting. He's talking about how the octopus skin can sense light and produce a response that affects the skin's color. And then he's saying that the octopus can actually see with its skin. And then it kind of got me thinking, like, what is seeing then? Because its skin doesn't have the same structure, obviously, as eyes do. And so would they be seeing, like, and being processed by the brain and being aware of what they're seeing, or was it just seeing as in their skin can see it and sense it and have a reaction to it, like changing colors? So I don't know if they ever actually ever say that they know if that's if that's a distinction. But yeah, it's saying we don't know whether the skin sensing is communicated to the brain or whether the information remains local. So that's kind of what I was saying. So then can they really say that that is seeing, or is it just sensing? And keeps what it sees to itself. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting thought. And then I kind of liked, oh, this part I write in caps, how do they know? So let's see what I was talking about. Oh yeah, so it's talking about, I think you pronounce it diametic or diamatic, but I will put it on the screen. Diametic displays, and these are produced while fleeing from a predator. And they're saying that they try to cause the predator to lose their bearings by, you know, creating really bright displays. And then I'm saying, how do they know? Like, I don't still quite understand the level of intelligence and the kind of intelligence that these animals would have. So it's like, do they make the conscious decision? Like, are they aware of the decision they're making, or do they just make it instinctually? And I think that's a really important distinction to make when you're talking about intelligence, because a lot of the philosophy part in here was talking about how the awareness of thought is more of the distinction than just the thought itself. So the fact that we as humans can reflect on ourselves and we can be aware. I don't know where it cut off. Basically what I was saying was that, yeah, the awareness of thought is the most important thing. So I think that's kind of put the nail on the head a little bit in terms of what I really think it causes an animal to be like really intelligent. Because if an animal just does these things instinctually, it's just like an automatic response. They're not thinking, it's just like in their instincts. So you could say that that is just an intelligent creature because their instincts are so perceptive and everything like that. But I think that and that's true, but that's where the word intelligence kind of becomes a little bit muddled, I think, and it comes very subjective, because I had this conversation when I was on my trip, like, what causes a person to be intelligent, and I was like, well, we're all intelligent. 'Cause this is after I had started this book. I was like, well, we're all intelligent organisms. Like, we can think, we can talk, we can communicate and create things, you know, we can do all these things that just your basic human can do, and that's intelligence in regards to the whole animal kingdom. We're like way up here with intelligence, you know. Obviously there's organisms that are very highly intelligent, you know, like octopus, like dolphin, like a bunch of other ones, but in the grand scheme of really, when you think about how many different species there are, the fact that this one species is so much more intelligent than these millions of other species, I think that we're all intelligent. And then obviously that's not what everybody means. They mean like when you say somebody is smart or whatever. But yeah, so it's just kind of an interesting, for me, interesting thing to think about. Oh, this is another thing that I thought was cool, was he says evolution is not heading anywhere, not towards us or anything else, but I can't resist seeing in both animals an unfinished quality. So with both animals, I think he's talking about baboons and cuttlefish, because yeah, he's talking about baboons and cephalopods. So this is where he starts talking about like the internal dialogue and what that plays a role in, or how that plays a role in intelligence. Here I wrote a note here. Oh yeah, so whenever I read stuff like this, I'm always kind of like freaked out, because it makes me feel like just a formula, and that we're all just able to be dissected and picked apart, and you know, we can all be added up, like we're just a sum of our parts kind of thing. But I think that we are more than a sum of our parts, and we are just rules, cells, and nerves. No, the only explanation is a soul. We cannot be explained completely by this, can we? So that's basically what I said. So it just seems to me, maybe I just don't have enough information yet, but it just seems to me that they keep trying to explain and find reasons and find, you know, ways to dissect us and put labels on things and everything like that. And I think that they can to a certain extent, but I think that it's partially just out of our reach, and there's something, you know, there's a soul inside of us that like is more and helps us. I don't know, maybe that's just me not wanting to believe that I'm just a brain, because I don't know, I don't get that. I can't, like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. That just doesn't make sense to me. Okay, another thing, he says, inner speech for Vygotsky is not merely an unspoken version of ordinary speech, but something with its own patterns and rhythms. This inner tool makes possible organized thought. So that's another thing, is organized thought, and how that is something that a lot of animals lack, and that's another sign of intelligence. Yeah, this is what I was talking about, the ability to question ourselves. Basically, that's pretty much like what I got from it. There's obviously a lot more, but I'm not just going to explain the entire book and every detail of it, because you should just read it. Very good. I think it was written pretty recently, so all this stuff should be pretty up to date. I think it was 2015 or 16 that he wrote it. 2016, yeah. So pretty recent, but basically it's very thought-provoking and very informative, and I learned a lot. If you're interested in this subject, definitely pick it up, because it's well written. It's not that long, so if you don't want to commit to anything like what I'm reading next, so it's a little heftier, but if you just kind of want something that's a little bit less intimidating, the print isn't too big either. The print isn't too small either, and there's kind of a section in the middle with some pictures, and there's a few diagrams throughout it. Not very often, but there's a little picture here, and I think I just saw one. Yeah, so I was talking about with the chromatophores and stuff. So it's really readable. He doesn't talk too much in sciencey jargon. There's a few things like that he talks about the different geological times. So there's the Cambrian explosion is mentioned a lot. You know, Permian extinction, that kind of thing, which I wouldn't have known if I didn't take my first year bio course. So just like, you know, pull up a Google timeline. I still don't know timelines. I was trying to talk about this book today, and this is, I find this so embarrassing. I was trying to tell them about the Cambrian explosion, and I couldn't remember how long ago it was, and I was like, oh, I think it was like 200 or 250 million years ago. And it was 530 million years ago, so I was wrong. But it kind of talks about stuff like that, but I don't think it's because he's not a scientist, he's a philosopher, so it's more like that. That's why I think it's interesting for people who aren't scientists to read, because it's not written by a scientist. He's still highly intelligent, but it's just a different kind of book, because he's a philosopher instead. So he has a different look at it, which I think that's why it was so thought-provoking, because the ideas he put forth were from a philosopher's standpoint. So yeah, I just really, really liked this book, and I just wanted to kind of talk about it while it was still semi-fresh in my mind. Just extremely interesting. And that's all for now. If I think of anything else, I will cut it in here. I said I would cut in if I forgot anything, and I did. And I just wanted to address the last section of this book, because it's so important, and I just loved it. It's called The Oceans, and basically he's just calling to our attention that for generations and generations, hundreds of years, people have thought of the oceans as this invincible, kind of vast, untouchable organism that nothing we could do could possibly affect it, and we know now that that's not true. And so he's just talking about that. I'm going to read the first paragraph. I just think it's gorgeous, and then the last line. The mind evolved in the sea. Water made it possible. All the early stages took place in water. The origin of life, the birth of animals, the evolution of nervous systems and brains, and the appearance of the complex bodies that make brains worth having. The first ventures onto land probably took place not too long after the history charted in my first chapters. Certainly by 420 million years ago, perhaps earlier, but the early history of animals is a history of life in the sea. When animals did crawl onto dry land, they took the sea with them. All the basic activities of life occur in water-filled cells bounded by membranes, tiny containers whose insides are remnants of the sea. I said in chapter 1 that meeting an octopus is, in many ways, the closest we're likely to get to meeting an intelligent alien. Yet it's not really an alien. The earth and its oceans made us both. And I just think it's such a beautiful thought and sentiment to make us feel so much more connected to the ocean, and I've always felt connected to the sea, and I think that this kind of perfectly explains why so many of us automatically respond so much to being near the sea, and why it's so comforting and so calming and makes us just feel bigger and smaller at the same time. And just the experience of being in and around the sea, I'm getting emotional about it, but I think it's because you put into words like why I feel like that, and why so many other people feel like that. And now I'm just gonna kind of read the last line. He says, and he just reminds us that when you dive into the sea, you are diving into the origin of us all. And I just, you can't say it better than that, you know. That is why we are so connected to the sea, and it's so important to preserve it. And I just get chills. I miss the ocean so much. Okay, anyway, cut back to, but if I don't think of anything else I want to talk about, final thoughts: super interesting, super thought-provoking, not really intimidating to read, super understandable, and not boring whatsoever. Very, very interesting. I'll link it, and you should go get it and read it, and let me know what you think if you read it. Super good. And yes, that's it for now, I think. Thank you for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, that's cool. Yeah, that's it. Okay.